the Zodiac killer's pattern. He was attacking young couples in suburban San Francisco towns. But what Zodiac really wanted and had not yet received was massive public attention. 29-year-old Paul Stine became the killer's next sacrifice for fame.
I think he wanted more press, and I think he went to an area which would give it to him. And so he came next to San Francisco.
Paul Stine, the driver for Yellow Cab in San Francisco, had picked up a fare in downtown San Francisco, and somewhere en route to the Sunset District, the fare asked him to stop at a certain location, and at that time the Zodiac killer had shot the cab driver.
He killed this driver mainly to get his shirt. What he was after was something to send with his letters that would prove each time that he was the killer. And unknown to the killer, he was seen by a group of teenagers across the street who were having a party, who phoned the police.
The individual I saw that night was a white male adult, approximately 35 to 45 years of age, 5 feet 10 inches tall, 180 to 210 pounds.
Fortunately, as I was told, they were looking for a black man. They had been given wrong information on the phone.
Since we were looking for a Negro male adult, we proceeded on Jackson Street towards Arguello, continuing our search.
He claimed later in a letter that he had been watching the whole time. He'd seen everything they'd done.
As we arrived at Arguello Street, the description of the suspect was changed to a white male adult. Believing that this suspect was possibly the one involved in the shooting, we entered the Presidio of San Francisco and conducted a search on West Pacific Avenue, the opposite side of the wall, the last direction that we observed the suspect going. Did not find the suspect.
And 2 days later, the Chronicle, where I worked then, received a letter from the Zodiac. The envelope was open. It was addressed to the editor, and it was like a letter to the editor. And the secretary who handled that correspondence opened the envelope, saw this blood-stained shirt, and read the letter and rushed it into the executives at the paper, and the police were immediately notified.
And they realized at this point that their San Francisco murder was linked to this series of couples being killed in the North Bay.
Reveling in the widespread publicity, Zodiac stepped up his campaign of terror. At one point, he threatened to shoot out the tires on a school bus and pick off the children one by one.
For a period of probably a month, people were riding, deputy sheriffs and highway patrolmen were either riding on or following school buses. Drivers were issued memoranda to, if somebody shoots out your tire, don't stop, keep driving. So there was a great panic.
The killer sent a diagram for an explosive device that was in the hillsides around Napa. And this was working on an electric eye system where everything else could pass, but a school bus would set this bomb off.
Zodiac never did attack a school bus, but he continued to send a stream of letters and ciphers to the newspapers, taunting the police with threats of future mayhem.
I didn't want anybody else to suffer or be killed, because even though we did get a little bit more data on the suspect every time he would communicate with us or commit a crime, it's a horrible price to pay for intelligence information, the death of another person.
In November of 1969, in one of his correspondence to the Chronicle, he said that from that point on, he was not going to announce each individual killing. And so from that point on, all we received in letters were numbers. He would put the Zodiac symbol, and then he'd put a new number, 14, 18, 23, and SFPD 0. In other words, he was ahead in the score. So we don't really know how many people he, in fact, actually killed.
The cab driver killing in 1969 was Zodiac's last known murder. He continued to write his taunting letters for at least 5 more years, always hinting at new murders, but never naming the victims. In October of 1970, Zodiac focused his unwanted attention on Paul Avery, the reporter who had written many of the articles about him.
The 2 homicide inspectors who were working the Zodiac case came in and tapped me on the shoulder and pulled me outside and said, we've received another letter from the Zodiac, and it was addressed to you. It was a Halloween card. It was interpreted as being a threat to me. At that point, he had been claiming 13 victims. This one mentioned 14, and the presumption was that either he had killed 14 people at that point, and maybe I was number 15, or maybe I was supposed to be number 14.
The search for the killer reached monumental proportions during the period from 1969 to 1974. Often, the police grasped desperately for clues.
It was one of the great manhunts of all time. They called in psycholinguistics experts like Murray Myron. They called in code breakers, and probably 2,500 suspects by the end of the time. Dealt with Napa, Vallejo police, San Francisco police, the FBI. They had Zodiac conferences. The Attorney General's office prepared a confidential document which listed all the known information, which listed possibly as many as 50 victims.
Another person that has a theory that all of this dwells from Mount Diablo, a mountain about 30 miles out of Vallejo, and they've drawn radiuses off of Mount Diablo, and this killer lines up people in these radiuses and does the killings there. That's never panned out either.
At one point, I received a phone call from Anton LaVey, who was the founder and the high priest of the Church of Satan. And this was, which was very big in the late 60s and early 1970s. He thought that one of his parishioners, one of his members, might be the Zodiac killer. And he provided me with some material. I mean, the Zodiac killer was so bad that even the Church of Satan didn't want him.
It was just a multitude of information coming from all different locations. People calling into us, calling into other police departments, and people were going every different direction. And there was nothing computerized at the time. We had no central depository for any of these reports.